In a grand mansion, an elderly woman showing signs of dementia begins to suspect her only son's fiancé. When the truth is revealed, dark secrets, fraud, and violence shatter the family's silence. But the real threat begins when the con artist returns with an even more ruthless revenge plan. The wind gently swayed the royal palm trees lining the entrance to the Ashworth Mansion, one of the most imposing townhouses in the Upper East Side of New York City. Built in the 1940s and preserved with all the elegance of the era, the property was known for housing one of the most traditional and influential families in New York high society. On the Carrara marble-covered veranda, seated in a wicker chair with navy blue silk cushions, Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth watched the movement of cars on the street with sharp eyes that contrasted with her increasingly fragmented memory. "Mrs. Ashworth, it's time for your medicine," Irene's sweet and firm voice echoed across the veranda as the housekeeper approached with a silver tray. At 68, Irene had worked at the mansion for nearly 4 decades, having watched the growth of Philip, Mrs. Ashworth's only son, and witnessed the passing of the family patriarch 15 years prior. "Thank you, Irene. You're an angel." Mrs. Ashworth smiled, taking the pill with slightly trembling hands. "Is Philip back from the company yet?" "Not yet, Mrs. Ashworth, but he called to say he'll be home for dinner and is bringing Dr. Vanessa." Mrs. Ashworth's smile faded, slightly. "That young woman, there's something about her that doesn't feel right, Irene. When she looks at me, her eyes don't smile along with her lips." Irene adjusted the shawl over her employer's shoulders, hiding her own concern. "Would you like me to prepare something special for dinner?" "Yes. Make that filet mignon with a wine reduction sauce that Philip adores. I want to see my son happy." She paused, her eyes suddenly confused. "What time is it again, Irene?" "It's 4:30 in the afternoon, Mrs. Ashworth." "Ah, yes. Time passes so quickly now. Sometimes I think it was just yesterday that Philip was running through the garden with his little puppy," Mrs. Ashworth sighed. "And now he's getting married, to that young woman with the cold smile." Irene gently squeezed her employer's hand. For years, she had watched as Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth transformed from a strong, decisive woman who had managed the family business with a firm hand after her husband's passing, into a lady of fragile health and wavering memory. In the last 2 years, the episodes of confusion had increased, but her intuition remained as sharp as ever. "I'll go prepare your bath, Mrs. Ashworth. Dr. Morris recommended that you rest a little before dinner." As she helped Mrs. Ashworth inside, Irene noticed the luxury car parking at the mansion's entrance. Through the vehicle's window, she distinguished the profile of Vanessa Costa, Philip's fiancée, speaking animatedly on the phone. The young woman's posture changed completely when she ended the call and got out of the car. Her shoulders straightened, a calculated smile appeared on her lips, and her eyes gained that glint that Irene recognized as pure falsehood. "Irene!" Vanessa's honeyed voice echoed through the entrance hall as the housekeeper descended the stairs after settling Mrs. Ashworth. "How lovely to see you. How is our dear Mrs. Ashworth today? Have the episodes of confusion lessened?" "Good afternoon, Dr. Costa. Mrs. Ashworth is resting now. Dr. Morris recommended tranquility." Of course. The poor dear. It must be so difficult for her to deal with the mental fog." The false sorrow in Vanessa's voice caused immediate discomfort in Irene. "I came early to help with dinner preparations. Philip wants to discuss the final wedding details with his mother." Irene nodded without showing emotion. "I'll finish preparing dinner then, excuse me." In the kitchen, while preparing the filet mignon, Irene discreetly watched Vanessa move through the living room, examining the family's art and antiques with calculating eyes, until she stopped before a portrait of Mrs. Ashworth in her youth. "What a waste," Vanessa muttered, thinking she was alone. "So much money in the hands of an old woman who barely knows where she is." Irene felt a chill. Mrs. Ashworth's suspicions were not just a result of her medical condition. There was something genuinely disturbing about this woman who had won over Philip with her charm, beauty, and supposed dedication to neuroscience. According to Vanessa herself, she was a renowned neuroscientist from Harvard, specializing in neurodegenerative diseases, which had made her even more attractive to Philip, who was desperate to help his mother. The sound of a car interrupted Irene's thoughts. Philip Ashworth, 45, heir to the tech empire built by his father, was arriving home. Tall and with the same piercing eyes as his mother, he entered carrying a leather briefcase and a bouquet of tulips, Mrs. Ashworth's favorite flowers. "My love!" Vanessa's voice changed completely, becoming sweet and affectionate. She ran to embrace her fiancé, who smiled, tired but happy. "Hello, darling. What a nice surprise to find you here. I thought you'd be at the lab until later. I decided to come early to help with your mother. I know how anxious you are to tell her about the project." Philip smiled, looking at his fiancée with admiration. "You're incredible, you know that. I'm going to take these flowers to Mother and then we'll talk." When Philip went upstairs, Irene noticed the instantaneous shift in Vanessa's expression. The loving smile vanished, replaced by a look of boredom and calculation. The housekeeper pretended not to notice and continued her duties, determined to remain vigilant. Something in Vanessa's behavior awakened all her protective instincts toward Mrs. Ashworth. Later, during dinner served in the dining room decorated with family crystal and silverware, Philip couldn't contain his enthusiasm as he spoke of the project he was about to launch. "Mother, we are finalizing the largest social project in the history of the Ashworth Foundation. We're going to build a complete educational complex in the South Bronx, with a school, a cultural center, sports courts, and a start-up incubator for young people from the community." Mrs. Ashworth smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "Your father would be so happy, my son." "It's an ambitious project," Philip continued. "I'm allocating almost half of my personal assets to ensure it's self-sustaining." Irene, who was serving dessert, noticed the flicker of alarm in Vanessa's eyes, quickly masked by a smile of admiration. "My love, your generosity is inspiring," Vanessa said, covering Philip's hand with hers. "But are you sure? It's a considerable amount." "Absolutely. Money means nothing if it can't transform lives," Philip replied, resolute. "I've already spoken with Charles, our lawyer, and we're structuring everything. I want to announce it officially at the engagement party." As she cleared the plates, Irene perceived the tension on Vanessa's face. Something had changed. Philip's philanthropic plans clearly did not please his fiancée, whose breathing had become faster and shallower. "Excuse me, I need to take an important call," Vanessa said suddenly, standing up and leaving the room with hurried steps. In the hallway, away from Philip's gaze, Irene saw her typing furiously on her phone, her face contorted in a barely contained expression of anger. The housekeeper exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Ashworth, who, despite her usual confusion, seemed to have picked up on her future daughter-in-law's change in behavior. "Philip," Mrs. Ashworth called softly, "are you as certain about Vanessa as you are about your project?" The businessman frowned. "Of course, Mother. Why do you ask?" "Just an intuition." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "There's something in her eyes that reminds me. Of what, Mother?" Philip leaned in, concerned. "I can't remember right now, but it's not good. It's not sincere." She shook her head, frustrated with her own mind that couldn't articulate the suspicion she felt. "It's just the medication, Mother. You're confused. Vanessa is wonderful and loves our family." Irene, discreetly observing the scene, noticed the shadow of doubt that crossed Mrs. Ashworth's gaze, not the usual confusion, but a momentary clarity mixed with deep concern. The housekeeper knew she needed to be even more vigilant. Something was about to happen in that house, and she would be the silent guardian of the truth, even when everyone else was deceived by appearances. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The morning arrived with a gentle drizzle typical of New York City, blanketing the gardens of the Ashworth mansion. Irene was preparing breakfast while watching through the kitchen window as Philip said goodbye to Vanessa at the main gate. He was heading to an important meeting at the company headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, while his fiancée was supposedly going to the neurological research lab where she worked. "I'll be back for lunch, my love," Philip said, kissing Vanessa affectionately before getting into his executive car. Irene noted the instant transformation. As soon as Philip's vehicle disappeared around the corner, Vanessa's passionate smile evaporated like dew under a strong sun. With decisive steps, she returned to the mansion, the high heels of her Italian shoes echoing on, the marble of the entrance hall like small bursts of authority. "Irene," the voice was sharp as a razor, "I want my coffee served on the veranda, now." The housekeeper nodded silently, accustomed to this duality. In 15 minutes, she brought a tray with coffee, fruit, and pastries to the veranda, where the day before Mrs. Ashworth had peacefully contemplated the garden. Now, Vanessa occupied the same space, typing frantically on her cell phone. "Finally," Vanessa muttered without looking up. "And where's the old woman, still sleeping?" "Mrs. Ashworth is in her room. The doctor will be here to examine." "Her at 10, Irene replied in a neutral voice, hiding her indignation. "Excellent. I need you to stay away while I speak with her. I have private matters to discuss." Irene felt a tightness in her chest. "I'm sorry, Dr. Costa, but Dr. Morris recommended that Mrs. Ashworth not get agitated. Tense conversations can worsen her condition." Vanessa finally looked up, a sarcastic smile forming on her perfectly made-up lips. "Fascinating how a simple maid thinks she can give me orders. Let me make one thing very clear, Irene. When I become the lady of this house, things are going." Toe changed drastically, starting with the staff. The threat hung in the air like an invisible poison. Irene maintained a serene expression, though inside her heart was racing. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had hinted at her dismissal once she married Philip. "Excuse me," the housekeeper said, retreating with the dignity she wore like a shield. Instead of going down to the kitchen, Irene quietly went up to Mrs. Ashworth's room. She found her employer sitting at her rosewood vanity, trying to arrange her silver hair. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashworth. I've brought your breakfast and your medicine." "Oh, Irene. I'm so glad you're here. I'm having trouble remembering how I used to do my hair for the foundation events." The frustration was evident in her trembling voice. Gently, Irene helped Mrs. Ashworth with her hair, observing in the mirror how her employer's eyes, despite the frequent confusion, still shone with intermittent intelligence. "Philip's fiancée is downstairs," Mrs. Ashworth commented. "That young woman makes me uneasy, Irene. Last night I had such a strange dream. She was opening all the safes in the house, taking the family jewels, tearing up the portraits." Irene hesitated. "Mrs. Ashworth, do you think I should call Mr. Charles? He has always been so loyal to the family." "Charles?" Yes. Mrs. Ashworth frowned, struggling to organize her thoughts. "He was my husband's friend since college, a trustworthy man." The phone in the room rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Dr. Morris saying he would be late for the appointment. Irene thanked him and hung up, only to hear firm footsteps coming up the stairs. Moments later, Vanessa appeared at the door, without knocking. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashworth." Her voice was sugary sweet. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm well, my dear," the matriarch replied, her instinct warning her to be cautious. "Irene is helping me with my hair." "How lovely. Irene, could you leave us alone? I have some ideas about the wedding decor I want to discuss with my future mother-in-law." The housekeeper exchanged a quick glance with Mrs. Ashworth, who nodded slightly. Reluctantly, Irene left the room, but she remained strategically close in the hallway, pretending to organize the linen closet. The conversation started pleasantly, with Vanessa talking about flowers and decorations. Gradually, however, the tone changed. "Mrs. Ashworth, actually, I came to talk about the social project Philip mentioned yesterday." Vanessa's voice had lost all its sweetness. "You can't let him do this." "Why not, my dear? It's a wonderful project that will help so many people." "Because it's a waste of money, money that should stay in the family." Vanessa leaned forward. "Or would you rather see the fortune your husband built thrown away instead of securing the future of your grandchildren?" Mrs. Ashworth seemed momentarily confused. "Philip has always been generous, like his father." "Generosity doesn't build empires, Mrs. Ashworth. You must have some influence over him. Tell him you don't agree with the project, that you want to see the assets preserved." "But I do agree with the project," Mrs. Ashworth's voice suddenly gained firmness. "My husband always believed in giving back to society. Philip is honoring that legacy." Vanessa's face transformed, the mask falling away completely. "You foolish old woman! Don't you realize you're being manipulated? Philip is wasting a fortune that took generations to build." Irene held her breath in the hallway. She had never heard anyone speak to Mrs. Ashworth like that. "I won't let it happen," Vanessa continued. "I have plans for this fortune, and no one is going to stop me." "Who are you?" Mrs. Ashworth asked, suddenly lucid. "You don't love my son." Vanessa laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the room. "Love? Who needs love when you can have money and power? Your son is just a means to an end, Mrs. Ashworth, a very profitable end." The sound of a cell phone interrupted the tension. It was Vanessa's phone. "Hello? Yes, I'm at her house right now." Vanessa walked to the window, lowering her voice. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. Yes, the plan continues, as we discussed. If the old woman interferes, we'll take care of her. Her mental illness will be our ally." Mrs. Ashworth turned pale, her hands trembling more visibly. When Vanessa hung up, she turned back to the elderly woman with an icy smile. "This stays between us, doesn't it? In any case, who would believe a confused old lady like you? Philip thinks your suspicions are just delusions." At that moment, the doorbell rang, announcing Dr. Morris's arrival. Vanessa quickly adjusted her expression, returning to the perfect, concerned fiancé. "Well, I think your doctor has arrived. I'll go down to greet him. Remember, Mrs. Ashworth, our little secret." And with a wink, she left the room. Irene entered immediately, finding Mrs. Ashworth pale and trembling. "Are you all right? I heard everything." "Irene," Mrs. Ashworth's voice failed. "She wants to destroy my family. She wants Philip's money." Her eyes welled up. "And the worst part is no one will believe me. My own mind betrays me. Philip thinks I'm becoming paranoid." The housekeeper held her employer's hands. "I believe you, and I will help you protect your family." "How?" "Philip is blinded by love." Irene thought for a moment. "Mr. Charles, we need to speak with him. If anyone can investigate this woman's past, it's him." A glimmer of hope appeared in Mrs. Ashworth's eyes. "Yes, Charles was always sharp and loyal to our family. I'll call him right now," Irene decided. "And in the meantime, I'll keep my eyes and ears open. Nothing that woman does or says will escape my notice." Mrs. Ashworth squeezed the housekeeper's hand with sudden strength. "My faithful Irene, you are more than an employee. You are part of our family." In the living room, Vanessa greeted the doctor with her best smile, playing the role of the concerned fiancé perfectly. Dr. Morris, a gentleman with grey hair and thin-rimmed glasses, didn't perceive the falsehood behind those calculating eyes. "Is the dementia progressing as expected?" Vanessa asked in a professional tone. "I'm worried about her recent changes in behavior. Just yesterday, she was making absurd accusations." "Unfortunately, confusion and paranoia are common symptoms," the doctor replied. "It's important not to contradict the patient during these episodes." Vanessa nodded with false understanding. "Of course, doctor. We are all dedicated to Mrs. Ashworth's well-being. She is so precious to our family." Meanwhile, upstairs, Irene was dialing the office number of Mr. Charles Middleton. The lawyer served clients in his downtown New York office, but had always made it clear that the Ashworth family had absolute priority. "Mr. Middleton, this is Irene from the Ashworth residence. We urgently need your help. It's about Mr. Philip's fiancée. Something isn't right, and Mrs. Ashworth is in danger." Hanging up the phone, Irene looked out the window and saw Philip's car returning to the mansion for lunch. Her heart clenched. How would she open her employer's eyes before it was too late? The battle for the truth was just beginning, and the housekeeper knew it would be a silent and dangerous fight against an adversary willing to do anything to get what she wanted. Charles Middleton's office occupied the 12th floor of a historic building in the Wall Street area. Overlooking the skyline of skyscrapers, the 63-year-old lawyer had dedicated his entire career to defending the interests of the Ashworth family, just as his father had done before him. That morning, after receiving the urgent call from Irene, Charles had set aside all other commitments and plunged into a thorough investigation of Vanessa Costa. "William," Charles called to his assistant, a young man recently graduated from Columbia Law. Did you get access to the Harvard academic records? The young man adjusted his glasses, handing a file to his boss. I did, Mr. Middleton. And you were right. There is no Vanessa Costa registered in the neuroscience program for the last 10 years, not in any other department either. Charles frowned, leafing through the documents. And what about her professional history? Also fake. The lab where she claims to work exists, but they've never heard of her. They used the institution's name without authorization. The lawyer leaned back in his leather chair, absorbing the information. In over 40 years of practice, he had developed a sixth sense for detecting fraud. But the case of Vanessa Costa was exceptionally sophisticated. Everything indicated that Philip, always so brilliant in business, had been completely deceived in his personal life. Call my contact at the FBI. We need more information on this woman. Meanwhile, at the Ashworth mansion, lunch was proceeding with apparent normalcy. Philip, absorbed in his social project spreadsheets, barely noticed the tension between Vanessa and Irene, who served the meal with her usual efficiency. Philip, darling, Vanessa gently touched her fiancé's arm. I've been thinking, maybe we should postpone the announcement of the project. Give your mother some time to get used to the idea. Philip looked up, confused. But you seemed so enthusiastic yesterday. Yes, but then I thought it over. It's a huge amount of money, love. What if we waited until after the wedding? We could reevaluate the budget together. Irene, pretending to arrange the table, observed the subtle manipulation. Vanessa was trying to buy time, probably hoping to gain legal access to the Ashworth fortune after the marriage. There's nothing to reevaluate, Vanessa, Philip replied firmly. The project is ready, the land has been purchased, and the permits are approved. The announcement will be next week, during the Foundation's event. Frustration flickered momentarily in Vanessa's eyes, quickly masked by an understanding smile. Of course, my love. You know best. Philip's cell phone rang. He answered quickly, and his expression turned serious. Charles, yes, I'm home now. All right, we'll be waiting for you. Hanging up, Philip seemed intrigued. That was Charles. He's coming over, says it's urgent. Is there a problem with the project contracts? Vanessa asked, trying to sound casual. I don't know, he wouldn't explain over the phone. Half an hour later, the family lawyer arrived at the mansion. Charles. Middleton was an elegant man, with neatly trimmed grey hair and the distinguished bearing acquired from decades of mingling with New York's elite. He carried a leather briefcase under his arm and a grave expression that Philip knew well. It was the same one he had used to communicate serious problems in the past. Charles, good to see you, Philip greeted him in the entrance hall. What's so urgent? We need to talk in private, Charles replied, casting a significant glance at Vanessa, who was observing the scene with apparent tranquility. There are no secrets between my fiancé and me, Charles. You can speak in front of her. The lawyer hesitated. Philip, I insist, it's a delicate matter that I'd prefer to discuss initially with just you. Vanessa intervened with her most charming smile. Don't worry, darling. I'll take the opportunity to visit the bridal salon at Bergdorf Goodman. We'll talk later. She kissed Philip on the cheek and, grabbing her designer handbag, headed for the door. It was a pleasure to see you again, Mr. Middleton, she added with false cordiality. As soon as they heard Vanessa's car leave the property, Philip led Charles to the mansion's study, a room, panelled in dark wood and lined with shelves full of rare books collected by his father. Now explain what's going on. Charles placed his briefcase on the mahogany desk. Philip, what I'm about to show you is the result of an investigation initiated at the request of your mother and Irene. My mother? But she's confused, Charles. The dementia is progressing. Mental confusion doesn't always mean a lack of perception, the lawyer replied, opening the briefcase. Your mother and Irene suspected Vanessa and asked me to verify some information. This is absurd. Philip shook his head, annoyed. Vanessa is a brilliant scientist devoted to our family. These suspicions are a product of mother's condition. Look at these documents, Philip. Charles spread several papers across the desk. Vanessa Costa doesn't exist. At least not the Vanessa Costa you know. What are you saying? She never studied at Harvard, never worked in any lab, and her academic record is completely fabricated. In fact, her real name is Cristina Mendez, born in Miami. Over the last 8 years, she has assumed at least 4 different identities in various cities across the country. Philip paled, his eyes scanning the documents with growing horror. Police, reports, sworn statements, photographs, all pointing to an elaborate web of lies. "This can't be true," he muttered, his voice betraying the doubt that was beginning to creep in. In New York, she was Vanessa Costa, the neuroscientist. In Denver, she was Patricia Vance, a financial consultant. In Los Angeles, Amanda Davies, a psychologist specializing in family therapy. In each city, she got close to wealthy men, preferably with elderly or vulnerable relatives. But Philip tried to process the information. Why? Money, Philip. Always money. Charles pointed to a specific testimony. This gentleman from Denver lost over $5 million in a joint account he opened with her. This other one from LA transferred significant properties to her shortly before she disappeared. Philip stood up, pacing nervously around the study. "We're talking about the woman I'm going to marry in less than a month, Charles. This is a very serious accusation. That's precisely why it needs to be investigated urgently, especially considering your plans for the social project." A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Irene bringing coffee. Her gaze met Philip's, who now looked at her with new understanding. "You suspected her from the beginning, didn't you?" he asked. The housekeeper nodded. "Your mother did too, sir. On the days she's more lucid, she notices how Dr. Costa changes when you're not around." Philip ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "I need to talk to Mother." Upstairs, they found Mrs. Ashworth in her room, sitting by the window that overlooked the rose garden she loved so much. Upon seeing her son accompanied by Charles and Irene, her eyes shone with unusual lucidity. "You know now, don't you?" she asked directly, surprising everyone with her mental clarity. Philip approached, kneeling beside his mother's chair. "Mother, why? Didn't you tell me clearly what you were feeling about Vanessa?" "I tried, my son." Tears glistened in Mrs. Ashworth's eyes, "but when I tried to organize my thoughts, they slipped away like water through my fingers. And you always seemed so happy with her." Philip hugged his mother tenderly. "I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you, for mistaking your intuition for mental confusion." Charles cleared his throat discreetly. "Philip, we need to decide how to proceed. The investigation isn't complete yet, but what we've discovered so far is extremely concerning. What do you suggest?" "We can't confront her directly yet. She'll flee like she did in the other cities. We need more concrete evidence, especially about her current intentions." Irene, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "She mentioned a plan on the phone, talking to someone. She said they would take care of Mrs. Ashworth if necessary." Philip turned pale. "Are you suggesting she could harm my mother?" "We don't know how far she would go," Charles replied gravely. "But your mother's dementia could be convenient for anyone interested in controlling her assets." "My God!" Philip looked devastated. "What have I done? How could I have brought this person into our home?" Mrs. Ashworth touched her son's face tenderly. "Don't blame yourself, my son. You always see the best in people. It's a gift, not a flaw." "We need a plan," Charles declared. "My contacts are investigating her other identities, looking for connections, accomplices. In the meantime, I suggest we maintain a facade of normalcy." "Normalcy?" Philip sounded incredulous. "How can I act normally knowing what I know now?" "It's necessary, son," Mrs. Ashworth said with surprising firmness. "If she realizes we've found out, who knows what she'll do." At that moment, Philip's cell phone rang. It was Vanessa. "I have to take this," he said, his voice trembling. "I have to pretend nothing has changed." "You can do it, sir," Irene encouraged, "for everyone's safety." Philip took a deep breath and answered, forcing a casual tone. "Hi, darling. Are you done at the store?" Vanessa's honeyed voice came through the line. "Yes, love. I found the perfect dress. I'm on my way home now. Is Charles still there? What was the urgent meeting about?" "Oh, nothing important," Philip lied, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Just some contractual issues with the project. We've sorted it. All out." "That's great. I'm excited to tell you about my ideas for the honeymoon. I had some wonderful thoughts. I can't wait to hear, Philip replied, the effort to keep his voice steady evident to everyone in the room. See you in a bit. When he hung up, he looked physically ill. I don't know if I can do this. You will, Charles affirmed with conviction. And in the meantime, we'll continue investigating. If my suspicions are correct, Vanessa isn't acting alone. We need to find out who else is involved in this scam. And what about the social project? Philip asked. Should I cancel the announcement? Not at all, Mrs. Ashworth replied, surprising everyone with her lucidity. That would be the first sign that something is wrong. Besides, those children need this project, Philip. Don't let this imposter alter your noble plans. Philip nodded, finding strength in his mother's conviction. You're right, Mother. The project will continue as planned. Charles put the documents back in his briefcase. We will keep this investigation in absolute secrecy. Irene, continue to observe and report any suspicious behavior. Philip, act normally, but be alert. And Mrs. Ashworth, he smiled at the elderly woman with respect, keep trusting your intuition. It's sharper than ever. When they heard the sound of Vanessa's car entering the property, they all exchanged determined glances. A silent battle had begun in the Ashworth mansion, a battle for truth, for justice, and for the protection of a family that now stood united against a threat they had invited into their own home. She's arriving, Irene murmured, looking out the window. Remember, Charles warned, absolute normalcy. We can't give any indication that we've discovered anything. Philip took a deep breath, preparing for the greatest role of his life, pretending to still be in love with a woman he now knew to be a complete stranger, a dangerous stranger with sinister plans for his family and his fortune. The New York sunlight filtered through the silk curtains of the Ashworth mansion's dining room, creating golden patterns on the table set with English china and silverware that had belonged to the family for generations. It was noon on Sunday, the traditional time for the family lunch, which on this particular day promised to be very different from the previous ones. Philip had spent a sleepless night tormented by the revelations about Vanessa. For the last 48 hours, he had maintained the facade of a loving fiancé with superhuman effort, while Charles and his team of private investigators gathered more evidence about the impostor's criminal past. The table is set, Mr. Philip, announced Irene, entering the study where he was reviewing for the third time the documents Charles had brought the day before. Thank you, Irene. Is my mother ready? Yes, sir. Mrs. Ashworth is especially lucid today. I think the gravity of the situation has brought some temporary clarity. Philip nodded, placing the papers in a locked drawer. And Vanessa? She just got back from the beauty salon. She's getting ready. The businessman took a deep breath, gathering strength for what was to come. Today will be a decisive day, Irene. Mr. Charles will arrive shortly after lunch with the final reports from the investigation. We need to keep Vanessa here until then. The housekeeper adjusted her immaculately white apron. I made her favorite menu as you requested, and Mrs. Ashworth is prepared. I'm worried about Mother's health. This whole situation could be very stressful for her. Your mother is stronger than she looks, Mr. Philip. Today's lucidity is proof of that. Upstairs, Vanessa was finishing her makeup in front of the mirror, completely oblivious to the fact that her charade was about to crumble. She wore an elegant teal silk dress that highlighted her carefully crafted beauty. Her cell phone vibrated on the vanity. So? Asked the male voice on the other end of the line. Everything's under control, Vanessa replied in a low voice. He doesn't suspect a thing. The announcement for the social project is on Tuesday. Excellent. The dossier is ready to be used if necessary, but it would be better if we could get access to the money first. I'm working on it. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Once we're married, I'll have access to at least part of the resources. 3 weeks is a long time. We need a plan B in case something goes wrong. Vanessa smiled at her own reflection. Don't worry, I have everything under control. The old woman is getting more confused by the day, and he trusts me blindly. Don't underestimate your opponents, Christina. That mistake has cost you dearly in the past. The use of her real name irritated her. Don't call me that. Vanessa Costa is who I'm now. For now, Until the next disappearance. She hung up abruptly, annoyed by the comment. Her accomplice sometimes seemed to forget who was in charge. After all, she was the one risking everything, infiltrating Philip Ashworth's life. The ex-journalist Oliver Finch was just a pawn in her larger game, useful for his connections and skill in manipulating information, but disposable when necessary. Coming down for lunch, Vanessa found the family gathered. Mrs. Ashworth occupied the head of the table, a position she rarely took since her condition had worsened. The matriarch seemed strangely composed, her clear eyes fixed on Vanessa with a disconcerting intensity. "What a pleasant surprise to see you presiding over the table today, Mrs. Ashworth," Vanessa commented, unable to completely hide her discomfort. "I've been feeling exceptionally well today, my dear," the matriarch replied with an enigmatic smile. Philip pulled out the chair for his fiancée, his face a mask of normalcy that concealed the storm within. "Mother insisted we have a formal lunch today. She said she had something important to discuss." Vanessa sat down, feeling a slight unease. There was something odd about everyone's behavior. Even Irene, usually discreet and silent, seemed to be watching her with unusual attention as she served the first course. "I hope you enjoy the asparagus soup, Dr. Costa," the housekeeper said. "I prepared it especially for you." "Thank you, Irene," she replied automatically, turning to Philip. "Any news on the project, darling? Is the announcement still on for Tuesday?" "Yes, everything is confirmed. I've even invited some journalists. It's going to be a big event." Vanessa smiled, mentally calculating how long it would take to transfer part of that fortune after the wedding. The social project was an inconvenience, of course, but there would still be plenty of money left to exploit, and if necessary, the dossier fabricated by Oliver could create a scandal that would destroy Philip's reputation and that of the Ashworth Foundation. The meal proceeded with superficial conversation. When Irene served the main course, filet mignon with a red wine reduction, Mrs. Ashworth cleared her throat softly. "I have a confession to make, my dears," she announced, surprising everyone with the clarity of her voice. "For the past few days, I've been pretending to be more confused than I actually am." Philip frowned, playing his part. "What do you mean, Mother?" "I wanted to observe certain dynamics in this house without interference." Her eyes met Vanessa's. "It's surprising how much people reveal when they think you're not really paying attention." Vanessa felt a chill, but maintained her smile. "Mrs. Ashworth, are you feeling all right? Perhaps we should call Dr. Morris." "That won't be necessary, dear. I'm perfectly lucid today. Lucid enough to finally say what needs to be said." The matriarch straightened in her chair. "Philip, before you announce your wonderful project, we need to clarify a few things about your fiancé." Vanessa's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "Mrs. Ashworth, if there's something bothering you about me, we can talk openly. We're family, after all." "Family?" Mrs. Ashworth's voice took on a sharp edge. "It's interesting you should mention that, considering you have such a peculiar view of families." Philip intervened, following the rehearsed script. "Mother, please don't start with this again. We've already talked about your unfounded suspicions." "Unfounded?" Mrs. Ashworth smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Philip, darling, open the folder that's beside you." Feigning reluctance, Philip opened the folder that Charles had strategically left on the sideboard. Inside were photos of Vanessa in her different identities, alongside other wealthy men in different American cities. "What is this?" Vanessa asked, her voice faltering slightly. "Why don't you tell us?" "Christina," Mrs. Ashworth replied, using the con artist's real name. Vanessa's face paled for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Philip, your mother is obviously having another confusional episode." Philip faced his fiancée, finally dropping his mask of ignorance. "She's not Vanessa. Or should I call you Christina? Or do you prefer Patricia, Amanda? So many names, so many victims." The realization that she was cornered hit Vanessa like an electric shock. Her eyes darted to the door, calculating the distance to the exit. "This is ridiculous," she said, trying to buy time. "Clearly someone is trying to slander me, probably some envious competitor from my academic work." "What academic work?" Philip pushed the documents toward her. "Harvard has never heard of you, nor has any other university you mentioned. All lies, from the very beginning." Vanessa stood up abruptly, knocking over a crystal glass that shattered on the floor. "I'm not going to stay here and be insulted like this. Sit down." Mrs. Ashworth's usually soft voice rang with surprising authority. "We're not finished yet." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Vanessa hissed, her face transformed by rage, all pretense of refinement gone. "You think you can corner me like this? I'll destroy you first." "With the fake dossier your journalist friend is preparing?" Philip asked calmly. "We know about that too." The shock on Vanessa's face was unmistakable. "How?" "You underestimated people's loyalty to this family," Irene intervened, observing the scene from the dining room entrance. "You underestimated a son's love for his mother, and most of all, you underestimated the intuition of a lady you considered just a confused old woman." Mrs. Ashworth rose slowly, leaning on the table. "I want you out of my house right now before I call the authorities." It was like setting off a detonator. Vanessa's entire sophisticated facade crumbled completely. Her eyes, once seductive, turned as cold as ice. "You won't report me," she snarled. "You don't have enough proof. And if you try, I'll use every connection I have to destroy this family's reputation and that pathetic philanthropic project of yours." Philip remained surprisingly calm. "It's over, Vanessa. We have testimonies from your previous victims, forged documents found in your apartment, recordings of your conversations with Oliver Finch planning the blackmail." "Impossible! No one knew about Oliver." "You made a classic mistake," Philip shrugged. "You talked too much on the phone inside this house, thinking no one was paying attention." Vanessa looked at Irene with hatred. You were spying on me." "Just protecting my family," the housekeeper replied with dignity. The con artist looked like a cornered animal, her eyes frantically scanning the room for an escape. Suddenly, she turned to Mrs. Ashworth. "You meddling old hag! Everything was perfect until you started putting doubts in your son's head." In a sudden move, Vanessa lunged at the matriarch, shoving her violently. Mrs. Ashworth staggered backward, off balance. Philip screamed, trying to reach his mother, but it was Irene who quickly intervened, catching the lady before she could fall. "You're insane!" Philip yelled, rushing to help his mother. "How could you?" Vanessa, realizing what she had done, backed away. Her plan was completely ruined. Worse, there were now witnesses to her physical assault on a vulnerable elderly woman. "This isn't over," she threatened, grabbing her purse. "You will regret this. I have information that can destroy this family. And I have rights. We live together, Philip. That gives me a right to a part of your assets." "Get out of my house now," Philip ordered, his voice trembling with contained rage, "before I forget the upbringing I received and do something I'll regret." Vanessa shot a final, hate-filled glare at everyone. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. This isn't over." Turning to Mrs. Ashworth, who was being supported by Irene, she added with venom, "As for you, old woman, you should be more concerned about your fragile health. Accidents happen so easily to people your age." "Mum," the veiled threat made Philip take a step forward. "This is your last chance to leave of your own free will." With a final look of contempt, Vanessa walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "You knew me as Vanessa Costa, but you never knew who I really am, and you'll find out the hard way." When the mansion door slammed shut, a heavy silence fell over the dining room. Mrs. Ashworth, still trembling from the assault, was led by Irene to the living room sofa. "Are you all right?" the housekeeper asked, concerned. "Do you need your medicine?" "I'm fine, Irene," the matriarch replied in a weak voice. "Just a little shaken." Philip knelt before his mother, holding her hands. "Forgive me, Mother. I brought this danger into our home. Don't blame yourself, my son. We were all deceived by her." Philip's phone rang. It was Charles. "I'm arriving at the mansion," the lawyer informed him. "How did the confrontation go?" "Worse than we expected," Philip replied. "She threatened all of us, especially Mother, and she mentioned having damaging information about our family. Keep the doors locked. I'm on my way with important news." 20 minutes later, Charles arrived at the mansion. His usually composed face showed an unusual urgency. Something more serious has happened than we imagined, he announced, entering the room hastily. My contacts have just informed me that Cristina Mendez, our Vanessa, is not alone in this operation. She's part of a ring specializing in scams against wealthy families. A ring? Philip paled. Yes, and there's more. After she left here, she contacted a man named Oliver Finch, an ex-journalist with a history of blackmail. They are preparing that fake dossier to destroy the reputation of your social project. Irene, who was bringing tea for Mrs. Ashworth, stopped suddenly. She mentioned a sister once, said they hadn't spoken in years. Charles consulted his notes. Cristina does have a sister, Jane Mendez. Unlike her sister, she seems to be an honest person, works as a nurse in Miami. They lost contact when Cristina began her life of crime. We have to do something, Philip decided. I can't let her destroy the social project or threaten my mother's safety. I've already taken some steps, Charles replied. I filed for a restraining order for your mother and registered a police report about today's assault. I've also alerted the building's security. She won't be able to get close again. And what about the threats to destroy my reputation? For that, we'll need concrete evidence against her and her accomplice, something that will incriminate them definitively. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. The battle against Vanessa, or Cristina, was just beginning, and no one knew for sure how far she would go to get revenge on the family that had unmasked her elaborate charade. She's going to try something, Mrs. Ashworth murmured, breaking the silence. I saw it in her eyes. That woman won't give up easily. Don't worry, Mother. Philip gently squeezed her hand. I won't let her get near you again. At that moment, the mansion's doorbell rang, startling everyone. Irene cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. Mr. Philip, she called, her voice tense. It's a young woman. She says she's Dr. Costa's sister. A young woman of about 30 stood before the Ashworth mansion, visibly nervous. Unlike Vanessa, with her designer clothes and studiedly elegant posture, the visitor wore simple clothes, jeans, a white t-shirt and a light jacket. Her brown hair was tied back in an unpretentious ponytail, and her face, though bearing some resemblance to Vanessa's, emanated a sincerity that had never been present in the con artist's calculated features. "Who are you?" Philip asked, keeping a cautious distance. "My name is Jane Mendez," the woman replied with a noticeable southern accent. "I'm Cristina's sister, or Vanessa as you knew her." Charles stepped forward. "How did you know where to find us?" Jane took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been following my sister's trail for years, trying to undo the harm she causes. Someone she scammed in Los Angeles warned me that Cristina was in New York about to pull a con on an important family. When I got to the city, it wasn't hard to figure out who this time's target was." Philip and Charles exchanged suspicious glances. After what they had been through with Vanessa, distrust was natural. "I understand your hesitation," Jane continued, "but I came because you need to know what Cristina is really planning. She won't just disappear after being discovered. Not this time." After a moment of consideration, Philip decided, "Come in, but understand that we are all on high alert." Jane nodded in understanding and followed the group to the living room where Mrs. Ashworth remained seated, observing the newcomer with attentive eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth," Jane gave a small nod. "I am so sorry for what my sister has done to you and your family." The matriarch studied the young woman's face for a long moment. "You have her eyes, but your gaze is completely different." "We're opposites in almost everything," Jane confirmed with a sad smile. "We grew up together in Miami, daughters of a humble family. Our parents were honest workers who did their best to give us an education and values. I followed their path. Cristina chose another." "Please sit down," Philip offered, still cautious. "What exactly did you come to tell us?" Jane perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in a sign of nervousness. "Cristina doesn't act alone. For years she's been working with a man named Oliver Finch, an ex-journalist who was kicked out of the profession for fabricating stories and blackmailing people." "We know about Oliver," Charles intervened. "What we don't know is what they're planning now. I know my sister. She can't stand being humiliated or losing. What happened today was the worst-case scenario for her. Being publicly unmasked, losing emotional control. Jane paused. She mentioned an important social project you plan to announce this week, Mr. Ashworth. Philip sat up straighter. Yes, the official announcement is on Tuesday. They plan to destroy the project and your reputation. Oliver has already prepared a fake dossier with forged documents suggesting embezzlement, corruption, and even exploitation of minors. That's absurd, Philip exclaimed. The project hasn't even officially started. The truth doesn't matter to them, Jane explained with regret. What matters is creating enough doubt in public opinion. Oliver has contacts in the press who will publish the accusations without verifying the source. Charles made notes in his small notebook. We need proof against them, something we can use legally. That's why I came, Jane straightened up, her face taking on a determined expression. I want to help stop them. I'm tired of watching my sister destroy lives. How could you help us? Philip asked, still suspicious. Christina doesn't know I'm in New York yet. I can approach her, pretend I want in on the scam. Get proof, recordings, documents. A tense silence fell over the room. The proposal was tempting but extremely risky. That would be very dangerous for you, said Irene, who had been observing silently until then. Your sister doesn't seem like the type to tolerate betrayal. Jane smiled sadly. It wouldn't be the first time we've faced off. Years ago, when I found out she'd scammed an elderly man in Miami, I confronted her and threatened to report her. She disappeared for 3 years after that. Why risk so much for us? Questioned Mrs. Ashworth, her voice frail but piercing. It's not just for you, Mrs. Ashworth. It's for all the past and future victims. It's for what's left of my family, destroyed by the shame of her crimes. Jane took a deep breath. And in part, it's for Christina too. She needs to be stopped before she crosses even more dangerous lines. Philip stood up, pacing the room as he considered the proposal. Even if we accepted your help, how would we make it work? Vanessa, or Christina, already knows we've unmasked her. But she doesn't know how much you've discovered, Jane explained. I can say I came to New York by chance, that I ran into her coincidentally. Knowing my sister, she'll try to manipulate me into helping her get revenge on you. Charles, who had been deep in thought, finally spoke. We could set a trap, get Christina and Oliver to incriminate themselves, recording confessions, collecting concrete evidence. Exactly, Jane confirmed, and I have a plan for that. Over the next 2 hours, the group devised a detailed strategy. Charles obtained a court order to record conversations, considering the threats Christina had made against the family. Philip contacted a trusted technician who would install recording equipment at the location chosen for the trap. I'll find Christina today, Jane decided. The faster we act, the less chance she has to do something impulsive and dangerous. How will we stay in contact without raising suspicion? Philip asked. We can use Irene as an intermediary, Charles suggested. She's not directly involved in the confrontation. She could meet Jane in public places to exchange information. The housekeeper nodded readily. I'll do whatever it takes to protect this family. When the details were finalized, Jane stood up to leave. At the mansion door, she turned to face the family one last time. My sister is more dangerous than she seems. Until we get the proof, increase your security and don't be alone. We'll be careful, Philip assured her, and you should be careful too. You're taking a huge risk. Jane smiled sadly. I've spent half my life trying to make up for the harm my sister causes. This might be my last chance. After her departure, Philip ordered the mansion's security to be reinforced. A nurse was hired to stay with Mrs. Ashworth full-time, and Irene began sleeping in the room next to the matriarchs. The next day, as planned, Jane found Christina in the apartment the con artist kept in the Upper East Side. The initial tension of the sisters' meeting gave way to Christina's characteristic manipulation as she quickly tried to recruit Jane into her revenge plans. It's perfect that you showed up now, little sis, Christina said, pouring herself a glass of expensive champagne. I need someone I can trust. What happened? Jane asked, feigning ignorance. You seem upset. Those Ashworths humiliated me. They had investigated my past, set a trap. Christina's eyes glittered with hatred. But they will regret it bitterly. What are you planning to do? A cruel smile curved the con artist's lips. I'm going to destroy that idiot's reputation and his precious foundation. I have a journalist friend who has prepared a dossier with bombshell accusations. When the press publishes it, his social project will crumble before it even begins. And will that work? Jane kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. Of course it will. Oliver is an expert at creating scandals. The documents look authentic. The accusations are serious enough to trigger an official investigation. Even if Philip manages to prove his innocence eventually, the damage to his image will be irreversible. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Oliver Finch, a middle-aged man with a cunning look and a well-cut suit that couldn't completely hide his predatory nature. "Jane, this is a surprise," he commented upon entering, sizing up Christina's sister with suspicion. "I didn't know you two kept in touch." "We ran into each other by chance yesterday," Christina lied, "and I decided she could be useful to us." "Useful how?" The suspicion in Oliver's voice was evident. "Jane is a nurse. She can help us access medical information on the old Ashworth woman, find ways to accelerate her condition, if necessary." Jane felt a genuine shiver of horror but maintained her composure. "I don't know if I could do something like that, Christina. It's one thing to expose a con man, it's another to physically harm someone." "Don't be a hypocrite, little sis," Christina rolled her eyes. "I won't ask you to do anything directly. Just some information on what medications could worsen her dementia. Nothing that can be traced back to us." Oliver watched the exchange with calculated interest. "Let's leave that for later. Our focus now is the dossier. Philip contacted me this morning." This information surprised Jane. It wasn't in the plan for Philip to contact the con artist directly. "What did he want?" Christina asked, equally surprised. "He proposed a deal, offered money in exchange for the dossier and our silence." A triumphant smile lit up Christina's face. "I knew it. He's desperate to save his precious reputation." "How much did he offer?" Jane questioned, trying to understand Philip's improvised strategy. "5 million, Oliver answered, a glint of greed in his eyes. "In cash." "And you accepted?" "Of course. I set up a meeting for tomorrow night at my apartment. He'll come alone, bring the money, and we'll hand over the original dossier." Christina laughed, a humorless sound. "Idiot. We'll make copies of the dossier beforehand. We get the money, and we can still leak the information later." Jane felt a knot in her stomach at her sister's perfidy, but forced a complicit smile. "Sounds like a foolproof plan. And it will be even better if we can record the meeting," Oliver added. "Imagine if we have Philip Ashworth on tape, admitting he's paying to cover up a scandal. That would be the icing on the cake." Christina's eyes shone with malice. "Oliver, you're brilliant. We'll record everything. That way, even if he tries something later, we'll have another weapon against him." Jane struggled to keep her expression neutral as her heart pounded. The plan was taking an unexpected but potentially advantageous turn. If Philip could get Christina and Oliver to admit to forging the dossier while they themselves were recording the conversation. "I'll need to get to the apartment early to set up the recording equipment," Oliver said. "Christina, will you be there?" "Obviously. I want to see his face when he realizes he has no choice but to pay up." "And me?" Jane asked. "What's my role?" Christina considered for a moment. "You'll stay in the back room if something goes wrong, if he brings someone or tries any tricks, you'll be our surprise element." After finalizing the details, Jane managed to leave with the excuse that she needed to get some things from her hotel. She immediately called Irene from the nearest payphone, as arranged. "I need to speak with Mr. Philip urgently," she said as soon as the housekeeper answered. "There's been a change of plans." "Did Oliver contact him?" "Yes, it was Mr. Charles's idea," Irene explained. "They decided to speed things up when they learned you had made contact with your sister. I'll transfer the call to the study." Minutes later, Philip answered. "Jane, is everything all right?" "Yes, but we need to refine our strategy. Oliver is planning to record your meeting tomorrow night to use the recording as additional blackmail." "That's perfect," Philip replied, surprising her. "If they're recording, they'll have even more incentive to speak openly about forging the documents. Our own recording will capture everything." But they're expecting you to bring 5 million in cash. I'll bring a briefcase with paper cut into the shape of bills. From a distance, it will look convincing. The important thing is to make them talk." Jane felt a wave of admiration for the businessman. "They want me there as a surprise element in case something goes wrong." "That complicates things," Philip pondered. "Charles and the team of private investigators will be positioned in the building, but they can't enter until we have the confessions on tape." "I'll find a way to get out of the apartment at the right moment," Jane assured him. "The important thing is that you get my sister to admit the dossier is fake and that she planned the extortion from the beginning." After hanging up, Jane leaned against the phone booth for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. She was about to betray her own sister, the person she had grown up with, sharing a childhood of hardship and dreams. But the Christina she knew from childhood no longer existed. In her place was a woman consumed by greed, willing to destroy innocent lives without the slightest remorse. With renewed determination, Jane straightened her shoulders and walked toward the cheap hotel where she was staying. The final confrontation was approaching, and she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to end her sister's reign of destruction once and for all. At the Ashworth mansion, Philip met with Charles and the security team to review every detail of the plan. The lawyer had managed to get not only the court order to record the conversation, but also a preemptive arrest warrant that would be executed as soon as they had the necessary evidence. "It's risky," Charles warned. "Christina and Oliver are experienced criminals. They'll smell a trap from a mile away." "That's why we have to be perfect," Philip replied. "This might be our only chance to stop them for good." In the upstairs bedroom, Irene was helping Mrs. Ashworth prepare for bed. The matriarch, though physically frail, had maintained a surprising lucidity since the confrontation with Vanessa. "I'm worried about Philip," the elderly woman confessed. "That woman is dangerous." "Mr. Philip won't be alone," Irene reassured her, "and her sister seems genuinely determined to help." Mrs. Ashworth held the housekeeper's hand. "You know, Irene, in all the years you've taken care of me, I've never felt as protected as I do now, when my mind seems to betray me. You are the guardian of our family." Irene's eyes welled up. "This is my family too, Mrs. Ashworth, and we will get through this together." As night fell over New York, each participant in this drama prepared for the final confrontation. In her luxurious apartment, Christina savored her revenge in advance, unaware that her own trap was about to close on her. At the Warwick Hotel on 6th Avenue, Jane mentally rehearsed every step she would take the next day. And at the Ashworth mansion, Philip reviewed the final details of the operation that would put an end to this nightmare. The stage was set for the final act. Night was falling over New York City as Philip Ashworth drove his car toward Midtown Manhattan, the neighborhood, where Oliver Finch's apartment was located. Beside him, on the passenger seat, rested a black briefcase containing only paper cut into the shape of bills, a necessary deception for the operation that would unfold in the coming minutes. In the inner pocket of his jacket, a small state-of-the-art recorder discreetly positioned would capture every word of the conversation. "Everything is in place," Charles informed him over the phone, moments before Philip parked. "My men are positioned in the building. The police are waiting for my signal 2 blocks away." "And the court order?" "In order. All we need is for Christina and Oliver to explicitly admit to forging the documents and the extortion attempt." Philip took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. "And Jane? Any news from her?" "She arrived at the apartment an hour ago, as planned. Remember, Philip, don't do anything impulsive. We need clear and unequivocal confessions." Upon entering the elegant building, Philip was greeted by the doorman, who had already been instructed to allow him entry. In the elevator, alone with his thoughts, he reflected on how drastically his life had changed in just 1 week. The woman he had loved and trusted had revealed herself to be a ruthless criminal. His mother, whom he believed he was losing to dementia, had shown extraordinary strength and lucidity in the moment of crisis. When the elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, Philip adjusted his tie and walked with firm steps to apartment 1002. Before he could ring the bell, the door opened, revealing the calculating face of Oliver Finch. "Mr. Ashworth, punctual as a good businessman," Oliver commented with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Please come in. The apartment was luxurious but impersonal, like a stage set designed to impress occasional visitors. In the living room, seated in a leather armchair like a queen on her throne, was Cristina Mendez, the woman he had known as Vanessa Costa. Philip, darling, her voice was pure, sweetened venom. What a regrettable situation, isn't it? If you had been more cooperative with our plans, we could have avoided this outcome. Philip remained calm, aware that every word was crucial. I came to resolve this situation as a businessman. You have something that can harm me. I have something you want. Straight to the point, I always admired that about you. Cristina stood up, walking toward him. Did you bring what we agreed on? Philip held up the briefcase. 5 million as requested. Now I want to see the original dossier and all the copies. Oliver approached, reaching for the briefcase. Money first, then the merchandise. Not so fast. Philip took a step back. How do I know there aren't other copies? How can I be sure you won't use this information after you get paid? Cristina laughed, a cold, calculated sound. You can't be sure. You'll have to trust us, just like I trusted you when I accepted your marriage proposal. Trust you, after discovering it. Was all an elaborate farce? Philip allowed a bit of his genuine anger to show. Your entire past is a lie. Harvard, the scientific research, even your name. Details, Cristina shrugged dismissively. The important thing is that now you're here, begging to save your precious reputation and your little social project. Speaking of which, Oliver interjected, I must congratulate you on the philanthropic plan. It was truly brilliant how we built such a convincing dossier from nothing. Journalists, authorities, the public, everyone will believe that the respectable Philip Ashworth was using a charitable front to embezzle millions. Philip felt a wave of satisfaction. Oliver had just explicitly admitted to the forgery. He needed more. How did you manage to create such convincing documents? He asked, feigning reluctant admiration. Oliver's ego was easily baited. Years of practice, my dear fellow. Forging signatures, creating letterheads, fabricating bank statements, it's an art, especially when it comes to projects that don't exist yet. There are no real records to compare them to. Impressive, Philip murmured. And did the idea to blackmail me come before or after Vanessa, pardon me, Cristina, approached me? Oh, from the very beginning, Cristina replied with a cruel smile. You were carefully selected, rich single with a vulnerable mother and a history of public generosity, the perfect target. We found you through a feature story on philanthropic entrepreneurs, Oliver added. Cristina studied your tastes, your routines, even accidentally bumping into you at that charity event. Philip felt a tightness in his chest as he remembered the day he met Vanessa, a seemingly chance encounter that he now knew had been meticulously planned. So, there were never any feelings at all, he stated, maintaining the strategy of extracting more confessions. Please, Philip, Cristina rolled her eyes. It was a job, like any other, and you made it so easy, so eager, to believe in the beautiful neuroscientist who was in love with your family. Pathetic. Oliver cleared his throat, clearly impatient. Enough reminiscing. Let's get down to business. The money, please. Philip placed the briefcase on the coffee table. Here it is. Now I want to see the dossier and hear how you'll guarantee this story won't leak. The original dossier is here. Oliver took a leather folder from a nearby drawer. It includes all the forged documents, manipulated contracts, doctored bank statements, fabricated testimonies from supposed scheme participants. A masterpiece, if I do say so myself. And the copies, Philip insisted. Destroyed, Oliver lied with ease. As agreed. Philip noticed the quick glance exchanged between the two con artists, a silent confirmation of their shared lie. I suppose I have to believe that, he commented with irony. Just like your previous victims believed you, right? Jane's voice cut through the air as she entered the room, surprising everyone. How many lives have you destroyed with these games? Jane! Cristina narrowed her eyes. What do you think you're doing? What I should have done years ago, her sister replied with determination. Putting an end to your crimes? Cristina laughed, but there was nervousness in her voice. Always the little saint of the family, came to give a moral lecture, You're too late. The deal is done." "What deal?" Jane pointed to the still-closed briefcase. "You haven't even checked the money. How do you know it's not fake?" A flicker of doubt crossed Oliver's face, and he immediately lunged for the briefcase. Upon opening it, his face went pale as he saw only cut paper. "You son of a—" he began, turning furiously to Philip. "Watch your words," Philip interrupted coldly. "Every insult, every threat, every confession is being recorded at this very moment." Christina's eyes widened in horrified understanding. You set us up." "Just returning the favor," Philip replied. "You planned to destroy me. Did you think I would hand over 5 million with no guarantee? Without checking if there were other copies of the dossier? Without protecting myself from future blackmail?" Oliver launched himself toward Philip, but was intercepted by Jane, who stood in his way. "Don't make your situation worse, Oliver. The authorities are already on their way." "You traitor!" Christina screamed, advancing on her sister. "You always envied my intelligence, my success." "Success?" Jane shook her head sadly. "Living off lies and destroying innocent lives isn't success, Christina. It's a tragedy. You could have been so much—" For an instant, something like remorse flickered across Christina's face, quickly replaced by fury. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have powerful connections, hidden documents. This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Philip declared, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. "Charles, you can come in." The apartment door opened again, revealing Charles Middleton accompanied by 2 private investigators and 2 police officers. "Christina Mendez and Oliver Finch," one of the officers announced, "you are under arrest for extortion, document forgery and fraud." As the officers read them their rights and handcuffed the con artists, Philip approached Jane, who was watching her sister, with a mixture of sadness and relief. "You were very brave," he said. "Without your help, we might never have gotten such conclusive evidence." Jane wiped away a single tear. "I did what was right. I hope one day she understands that." As Christina was led past them, she cast one last look at her sister, a look where anger and betrayal mixed with something deeper and indecipherable. Then she lifted her chin in a gesture of wounded pride and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the last vestige of the woman she had pretended to be. 3 months later, the Ashworth Foundation officially inaugurated the Eleanor Ashworth Educational Complex in the South Bronx. The project, which had initially faced skepticism after rumors of irregularities were quickly debunked, was now celebrated as a model of corporate social responsibility. On the stage set up for the ceremony, Philip Ashworth cut the inaugural ribbon alongside his mother, Mrs. Eleanor, whose mental health had surprisingly stabilized in recent weeks. Although she still had episodes of confusion, the matriarch enjoyed long periods of lucidity, especially when involved in activities related to the social project that bore her name. "I'm so proud of you, my son," she murmured, squeezing Philip's hand as they watched the hundreds of children who would benefit from the complex. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mother," he replied with emotion. "It was your intuition that saved us." "And Irene," Mrs. Eleanor added with a smile, "our silent guardian." As if summoned by her words, Irene approached the stage, impeccable in a navy blue dress specially chosen for the occasion. After the events that had brought the family even closer, Philip had insisted that the housekeeper was no longer just an employee, but an integral part of the Ashworth family, entitled to participate in all important moments as a guest of honor. "The children are eager to show you the performance they've prepared," Irene informed them with a radiant smile. As they walked to the area where the young students were waiting, Philip spotted a familiar figure among the complex's new staff. Jane Mendez, now the coordinator of the project's preventive health department, was chatting animatedly with a group of professionals. After the trial of Christina and Oliver, which resulted in significant convictions for multiple crimes, Philip had offered Jane the opportunity to work on the social project. Initially reluctant to accept anything that might seem like a reward for testifying against her own sister, she finally relented when she realized the good she could do with her nursing background. "Jane," Philip called, approaching her, "how are the preparations for the school health program going?" "We're almost ready to start consultations next week," she replied enthusiastically. The equipment has arrived, and the team is complete. Soon we'll have early diagnosis and follow-up care for all the children. Philip noticed how Jane had blossomed in recent months, free from the burden of trying to compensate for her sister's crimes. Although she still occasionally visited Christina in the women's prison, where she was serving her sentence, she had finally begun to live her own life, building a path based on her own values and choices. The ceremony continued with emotional speeches, cultural performances by children from the community, and the unveiling of the complex's various facilities: a full-time school, a cultural center with a library and theater, sports courts, and the innovative Technology and Entrepreneurship Center, where young people from the community would receive vocational training and support for developing social startups. At the end of the event, as the crowd dispersed and guests exchanged enthusiastic impressions of the project, Philip found a moment of quiet in the newly planted garden that would one day become a lush urban oasis. There, away from the spotlights and cameras, he allowed himself to reflect on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. The scam planned by Christina and Oliver had been dismantled. His mother, though still facing the challenges of dementia, was enjoying a quality of life he hadn't dared to hope for. The social project he had always dreamed of was becoming a reality before his eyes, and perhaps most surprisingly, he had found a new extended family in the people who had supported him during the crisis: Irene, who had transcended the role of housekeeper to become a confidant and protector; Charles, whose commitment to justice had proven unshakable; and even Jane, an unlikely ally born from the ashes of betrayal. "A penny for your thoughts," Mrs. Eleanor's soft voice interrupted his reflections. She approached slowly, leaning on Irene's arm. "I was just thinking about how the worst situations sometimes lead us to the best outcomes," Philip replied, offering his arm to his mother, who sat beside him on the wooden bench. "Do you know what your father always used to say?" Mrs. Eleanor smiled, her eyes momentarily distant, as if reaching for a precious memory. "That true fortunes aren't the ones we keep in safes, but the ones we invest in the people around us." Philip nodded, moved. He would be proud to see this day. "He is seeing it, my son." Mrs. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Somehow he is seeing it." Irene, who had respectfully kept her distance, approached with a slight smile. "The journalists are looking for you for some final statements, Mr. Philip." "Let's go together," he decided, standing up and offering support to both his mother and the housekeeper. "This achievement belongs to all of us." As they walked back to the educational complex that now stood as a symbol of hope on the horizon of the New York community, Philip understood that the true legacy of the Ashworth family would not be measured in fortunes or properties, but in the lives transformed by their actions. From betrayal and deceit had emerged essential truths about loyalty, courage, and the regenerative power of generosity. The sun began to set over New York City, casting a golden glow on the complex's new buildings. Somewhere within those walls, hundreds of children would find opportunities that would change their paths forever. And perhaps, Philip thought, some of them would one day tell their own stories of overcoming adversity and transformation, stories born from a family's decision to turn a painful experience into a gift for the future. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of the Ashworth family, of Irene and of Jane, has touched your hearts. At the crossroads of life, it is our choices that define who we truly are. Like Mrs. Eleanor, who even when her memory failed, kept her intuition about people's character intact. Like Irene, who proved that loyalty and courage know no social barriers. Like Jane, who chose the difficult path of truth, even when it meant confronting her own family. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our exclusive dramatic series. Leave a like to show us you appreciate our work, and share in the comments which character touched your heart the most. The next emotional story is already being prepared especially for you, with new dramas, twists, and lessons that will stay in your heart. Until the next episode,